Okay, welcome to Global Entrepreneurship Week and day 3 of 7 days of free webinars, especially tailored for rural Australia. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kerry and tonight's special guest is Michael Kerr of Kerr Capital. And Michael and I both have a passion for rural business, and we both travel widely in the region and interstate with our respective businesses. Michael specifically assists people to buy and sell their businesses, which is why I have invited him to share his knowledge this evening. While startups seem to be the hot topic, especially with young people, tonight's conversation is exploring why purchasing an existing business is a smart move and why now is a particularly good time to do it. So if you're on social media, the hashtag is GEW 2017 and our Twitter handles are Kerr Capital, Kerr Capital, and Kerry Words, Kerry with a Y. So enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Michael now. Welcome, Michael. Look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Kerry, and a really great initiative by you to get this off the ground. 7 days is pretty good going, so well done on that. And welcome everybody tonight. I'm looking forward to presenting. It'll probably run between 30 and 40 minutes, but it's I guess it's content rich. But I want to leave you with a pretty good overview of why you should consider buying, why the time is right, and also the 5 or 6 really important steps in the process. So we'll kick off. Look, I am a very big advocate of the idea of buying existing small businesses. As Kerry said, there's a lot of focus on startups, and I just think there's the country has 2.2 million small, medium, and micro businesses, and many of them are owned by baby boomers. So there's an awful lot that maybe not necessarily big, but they're proven and a really good opportunity. So yeah, I'm the founder of Kerr Capital. I'm really proud to be delivering in conjunction with Kerry as part of Global Entrepreneurship Week. So the webinar, as I said, I said something differently, but it's about 40 to 45 minutes to cover the material in the hour. We'll see how we go. Happy to take questions as we go or at the end, and I think Kerry will be the ears for that as the webinar administrator. And you can send the question through to her, and she'll and we'll answer them. If I can't answer them as we go, we'll have time at the end. So the idea of buying versus starting up, it's there's this kind of dominant thought that, and startups are great, and it suits. There's a whole lot of industries and business opportunities that suit startup mode. So I'm not saying it's one or the other. I'm just saying give more consideration to buying. But I guess some of the flaws, people do tend to associate startups with I'm not spending any money and it's cheaper and easier. But you're always spending your time, and there's a cost to that. So what I'm saying, there are risks as well. So with an existing business, what you get at a really high level is you get a running start. There's somebody who owned that business has done hard work. They've got a brand and a phone number and a website and customer bases and all sorts of things that enable you to start running a business rather than worrying about where you're going to get your first customer from. So therefore, you're able to focus on growing it rather than just getting that very first customer. So it's, most businesses are going to have existing relationships, and they might be relationships with suppliers or customers or staff even. Possibly they might be easier to finance as well. If you're going to borrow money, to go to a bank or a financier and say, look, this business has been around for 10, 20, whatever years, and it's proven. There are people that want the product or the service that the business is selling. And to draw back to what I said earlier, that I really think, you know, there are a lot of startups that may well or should well consider the idea of faster growth by buying the existing business in and around the industry that they're operating in, rather than just bootstrapping and starting from scratch. So there's some reasons why you ought to think about it. But from here on in, I'm going to take you through the key steps, and like everything that I try and do, it's structured. If you want to be successful, you got to do certain things in certain ways, and if you listen through to the end, you'll get the 5 or 6 steps that are involved, and broadly how to find and then evaluate and then negotiate the right acquisition. And look, the steps that I'm going to outline apply regardless of whether you're looking to buy a millions of dollar value business, or whether you're looking to buy something that you want to supplement your part-time or full-time employment with. So it's the same process. Just a little bit of a legal disclaimer. I'm not giving any financial advice or legal or tax advice tonight, but if you get down the track and you get really interested in businesses, by all means, go and see people that can do that stuff properly. So let's start with why you would own a small business, and think about, do you have the right reasons and some relevant experience and the motivation. The biggest thing here for me is that some point, maybe 5-10 years ago, we crossed this threshold where the idea that you would have, maybe it's even longer ago, but there was a point where we said for a long time, if you had a good job, you were secure and you could rely on it, and you could bank it in effect. But it's been a significant turnaround, and we see it now. Employment insecurity. The casualisation of the workforce. So there are factors that are contributing to the value and the certainty around a job just not being anywhere near what it was. And so that plays on people's minds. So there's never been a better time when you don't have the sense of control with your job to perhaps make the leap into a small business where arguably now you could have more control than being at the behest of a large corporation. So you still got to have the good reasons, and you've got to have some of the right experience, and you certainly got to be motivated, because it ain't easy, but it's worthwhile, and it's and it can be really make you very happy and wealthier. So some of the specific reasons, you might go into a small business, to create wealth, like you go into property investment or share investing. You might go into it to earn a living that is more attuned with your tastes and your wishes to travel, or your to buy a big house, whatever it might be, or maybe that you just want to downsize and actually earn a modest amount of money. So none of these things I'm going to outline are mutually exclusive, but often people will have a need for creative expression and freedom that they're not getting in their job, and so they may have a good job or a well-paying job, but perhaps not getting the freedom to do the sorts of things that really really make them happy. So that's a valid reason. The idea of being your own boss and having flexibility is enormously appealing to a lot of people, and of all the things that small business offers, that's one of the really great things, is the ability to control your destiny. If you have had a job, or you're underemployed, or you're thinking you may be made unemployed, then the next step is, what job am I going to get to replace the job I'm about to lose or lost or don't like anymore? And it's getting harder and harder to find those jobs. The employers expect more and can demand more. So sometimes it's driven by, and as Kerry said, we both, particularly Kerry, but I do a lot of work in regional areas, and the idea of sea change and tree change is becoming more and more of a factor. I spoke on that at two conferences in the last few years. One in Canberra, the Australian Regional Development Conference, and one at the State Government of Victoria. So that's a real driver. Property prices are another contributing factor. The affordability or unaffordability of a house in Melbourne, Sydney, and other major cities is just forcing people to think about, is there a different way? So that's another reason to think about moving. The logical progression is perhaps you don't have the same job opportunities, so buying a business might be the way to enable that move, and all the lifestyle benefits. So, and I said this earlier, it can be straight up dissatisfied with your job. A good example of someone who bought a small business, a really tiny business, was Carolyn Creswell from Carmen's. Part-time job turned into a business acquisition when she was at uni, and look where she is now. And I also understand from reading about Paul Little from Toll, I think he's a billionaire officially, but his wife had a hospitality business at some point early in their professional careers. So yeah, a lot of good reasons. Some of them won't apply, some of them will. It depends on the individual, but you can achieve a lot of those objectives, when in owning a small business. But don't underestimate what's involved. It's and especially don't buy a business just as a knee-jerk reaction to an emotion or a situation, like you're threatened or you've been sacked, and you knee-jerk go out and buy something that looks really interesting, but you haven't done the work to dig down and understand whether it's a good business. But so before I'd say to anybody, the idea of owning a small business can be really attractive, and we're going to go through the steps to do it well. But before you make one of the things that I'd be recommending you strongly do is to go out and talk to some people that have run, people that friends, not necessarily close friends, but or it could be connections, and ask them what it's like to run a small business, and you'll get a mixture of views. So, but that's incredibly powerful to get the perspective of someone who's doing it or has done it. And look, obviously, look at the financial risk from the point of view of, can you afford to lose it? How do you minimize what you lose? And talk about that with your trusted advisors. This is step 2, but it's really if you've gotten through that stage and you're thinking, yeah, this is what I want to do. The cold hard facts are there's a lot of businesses for sale, but there's multiple more, maybe 10, maybe 20 times more businesses that are potentially you could potentially buy that aren't actually advertised for sale. So and I'll come to that again in a little while, but what it means is that when you start your search, when you start looking, you've got to have some criteria to help you cut through all of these shiny, interesting looking business opportunities. So otherwise you're going to spend an awful lot of time going down a lot of dark alleys. So criteria are critical. When and this is a table that essentially says there are probably there's 7 listed here of criteria that would be really helpful, and some are quite obvious. What's the industry that or industries that you're drawn to, and then bring some expertise to, and have interest in. The location, so obvious, but the size, and that goes to how much you're going to need to pay for it, how it can be financed, the match with your own personal skill sets, and match with your own personal interests. And if you want to extend it right out to the end, is it the sort of business that is more easily you're more easily able to exit from down the track? So there are more criteria, and but there's 7 that'll get you off to a pretty good start, because you're going to spend a lot of time looking. Even if you have good criteria, you're going to spend a lot of time looking. So look in the right places and for the right kinds of businesses. As you go through your search, you might find you're going to change your criteria, or perhaps you're just not finding the sorts of businesses that you need or you like, so you're going to have to rethink your criteria, but have some to start the search process. I hinted at this just a little earlier, and it's understanding what's for sale. 2.2 million SMEs in Australia, so there's an awful lot. Now, probably 80% of those are 0 employees, and don't let that put you off. I'm regularly work with businesses that are run by an individual that they're making very attractive living, and they're using subcontractors, or they've got a different basis for structuring their business. So according to the tax office, they have no employees, but they might be turning over 100, 200, 500 or more thousands of dollars a year. So don't let that concern you too much. But the market of businesses that are potentially for sale comprise what's actually advertised, and the much bigger segment, which is the unadvertised market. Before I drill down on that, I wanted to just kind of make it really clear, when most of the time, if you're actively searching for a business, you're going to be dealing more with owners selling their own business than you are with brokers who are selling businesses for owners. So it's helpful to understand what owners, why they might be thinking of selling. And the obvious one is they're all getting older, but it really gives you a really good idea as to why this hidden market, or the unadvertised market, is so substantial. But aside from being just having gotten off their backsides to do anything about it, some of the reasons might include they just don't know. This is the owner. They might not know who to ask, who to turn to about selling their business. They can just be plain old indecisive. That's easy. Get busy running the business day to day, and the idea of getting the business ready for a sale, knowing it's going to take a lot of effort, it can make it easy to put off. Sometimes there's just a reluctance to want to advertise it, so they don't do anything about it. Sometimes they think the business hasn't got any value. They've been in it 20, 30 years. They've done okay out of it, but how could this be worth anything to anybody? They can be busy and tired. A lot of them are. Don't want to spend any money on preparing the business for sale. So there's some pretty interesting sort of psychological and emotional drivers there that give you a bit of an insight as to, when you're dealing with an owner, how they might be thinking. I just want to go back to the one about that owners think the business has no value. There's also the counter to that, which is business owners that think they're very modest businesses going to be worth millions of dollars and fund their retirement. So you get all sorts of extremes. All of these owners, save for the ones that are perhaps in their early days of growing the business, maybe in their 20s, 30s, perhaps even 40s, you know, when you've been in there for 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to start asking yourself, you know, the thoughts come to them, you know, I'm going to have to sell it sometime. What do I do? And they'll be, you know, they'll ask friends, they'll talk to other people, and they'll soon find out that, you know, to sell a business is going to take 12, 18 months, you know, often 2 years and up to 3 years, particularly in regional areas. Just the pool of buyers isn't so deep. So, you know, be really tuned into that, because they're thinking, oh, it's going to take that long. If somebody walked in tomorrow, I'd probably sell it a lot cheaper because I don't want to wait that long. You know, they're thinking, is there another way that I can sell this more quickly? You know, do I really want to spend money on advertising and the time on business exit planning? You know, is anyone really going to be interested in my business? So, is it really worth anything? And these are just a sample of the sorts of questions spinning around the head of owners, and the point is, this is why so many of them won't have done anything about actually putting the business on the market or getting it ready, and B, why they would be so receptive to someone knocking on the door and saying, hey, you know, I'm after a business that looks a bit like yours, you know, can we talk? And I've done an awful lot of acquisition work over 15 years, and I, you know, pretty much if I make 10 phone calls to business owners on brief from somebody, typically 7 or 8 will have a conversation, and the other 2 or 3 will comprise of one who's maybe already for sale, and maybe one that's clearly doesn't want to sell, but the middle 8 will typically be open to a conversation. You can chew a lot of time, but that's the sort of scale of potential interest in owners wanting to sell. So it's pretty massive, and you've got to be efficient to take advantage of it, but it's there. Kerry shared with me this article from Sydney Morning Herald just a couple of days ago. It's from another Kerry Bolton, and this is not front page, but the highlighted bits say that in 2011 the median age of Australian business owners was 47, with 22% over 65 years. Well, look, anyway, that was one statistic. But at this rate, the median age of business owners will be 55 by 2019, so another, a couple of years. The key takeout was, even though 60% of small business owners expect to exit their business within 10 years, more than 60% don't have an exit plan. So that, there's a lot of numbers around, and sometimes they vary and they don't line up. But the point that I'm really trying to impress on everybody here is that there's an awful lot of businesses that are thinking about selling it, and are going to need to sell over the coming decade. So really significant buying opportunities. So if you want to describe the way the small business market's operating now, the pressure's mounting on owners, because they're hearing more and more about those sorts of statistics. The baby boomer business owner phenomenon and the much talked about business exit tsunami. So there's fundamentally there's a very big imbalance at the moment between the supply, that's all the businesses that are either advertised or would be for sale if you made the approach, and the demand for them. They're generally characterised by lack of preparation, owners having very wide perspective on values from way high to way low. What that means is that if you have a particular type of business you want to buy, and you talk to 10 owners, you're going to get some really wacky and varied views on what they think it's worth. So you know, if you get lucky, you might get something really good, really cheap.
Michael, can I just jump in here for a minute, because I'm really interested in that. From how do you determine what is an appropriate value from a buyer and a seller perspective?
Look, I guess it comes down to, for me, it's always about two approaches. One is, and assuming you do really good, you know, basic but thorough financial analysis, you work out whether it's actually making any profit after the owner pays themselves properly. And if it is making some profit over and above, you know, the owner's wages, then you can start to look at a valuation approach based on a multiple of earnings. Maybe that's small businesses will sell for between 1 year's profit and 4 years' profit. That's a very broad you know, range, but that's kind of, you know, where you might be. And what determines 1 year or 4 years is, you know, factors to do with how sustainable the industry is, and has it got any, you know, monopoly control, any special products. So there's a whole, but that's sort of one way to value it. A lot of the time, these businesses don't really have significant profits when the owner's paid a decent wage for what they do. So then you start to look at it more from the point of view of not asset value, but more from the point of view of if you were going to start that business from scratch, how much would you spend to get it to where it is today? And so it assumes you can drive the business a bit harder and make it, you know, more efficient, more profitable. But you know, if you account for all the things that go into building a business, there's, you know, there's an awful lot of time and expense that you could spend yourself and risk in a startup, but it's already been spent and proven in an existing business. So, you know, that's about saying, yeah, look, the profits aren't massive, but the potential for me is good. So, what would I be risking if I tried to replicate this myself? Does that make sense to you, Kerry?
Yep, that sounds really good. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So that's where you go. So overall, you know, the pressure on sellers is mounting. If you're out looking for businesses that run under management, you know, good luck, because if an owner's got one of those that really truly does run under management, they're not going to sell it in most cases. So in terms of what's advertised, if you want to start, and you should start to look at, you know, the big online directories, and the biggest Seek's probably the big, I think it certainly is the biggest, maybe has 18,000, 20,000 listings. Eden Exchange has maybe 10 or 12. B-Sale has 7,000 or 8,000. So you can get a really good feel for what's advertised for sale by looking at those directories. They're dominated by the brokers. That's where I said earlier, you're going to be dealing with brokers and owners direct, but owners direct in a much more larger volumes. But here, these are dominated by brokers selling for owners. A lot of, you know, there's a lot of franchises in there. A small number of owners selling themselves, and yeah, that was right. So Seek's about 18,000. When you do drill down on Seek, that's a pretty essentially out of their 18,000. About 66% of all the businesses that they have listed are cafe and food retail related. So if that's not your thing, you know, then you're probably even greater need to go and think about the kind of business you want to buy and approach the owner directly, because Seek and the others are all dominated by those you know, retail food, you know, cafes and restaurants. So yeah, there are some good businesses on there, but you got to dig a bit deeper. What's not advertised for sale? for all the reasons I've talked about, I think the hidden market or the unadvertised market could be, 10 or 20 times the advertised market. Like a lot of these things, it's hard to put numbers on it, but I reckon there's somewhere between, around 50 to 70,000 unique businesses advertised for sale. Lots of the platforms or directories have the same listing, but so the hidden market could be 500,000 or maybe maybe 1 million, and that doesn't scare me at all. I think it's just the weight of the age and the weight of businesses owned by owners over 55 or approaching that time. Not that that's old, but that's when they start to think about getting out. So yeah, it's amazing. So lots of gold in their hills, in the hidden market, but you'll be dealing with the owner directly. We're getting down to some nitty gritty now, how to actually assess a business. And if it's for sale by a broker, you're going to get an information memorandum or a basic business summary. You're going to get a financial summary. You probably get an indicative price or a price range, which is for you, put it aside and do your analysis and work out what it's worth to you. There's that's pretty much good advice. Basically, and when you're dealing with, if you're on the search for a business, don't expect brokers to try and go hunting for you. They'll try and sell you what they have. That's how they make their money. I understand that. I'm a broker. I know what it's like, but don't be thinking you're going to get lots of helpful advice. They'll push what they've got. So there's limited potential for them to find you a business other than what they've got. The brokers out there, it's a mixed bag. There's some really good brokers, really straight up, and there's some brokers that you ought not deal with. You got to make some inquiries and find it out. So I want to now dealing directly with owners, because I think that's where the gold is. Slides are out of order a little. If it's for sale by the owner and not formally for sale, so you've made the approach, you're not going to get anything terribly quickly. I've already said they're unprepared, so they'll love the fact that you've given them a call in a lot of cases, and but don't be too concerned about that. They're not terribly prepared. So if you feel like it's a business that's of interest or value, be patient and with them. Be clear, but be patient, and help them through the process. The best business sales that I've been involved with over many years are when there's a fundamental understanding or trust between both sides. If you're at loggerheads from the beginning, it usually ends pretty badly. So doesn't mean you need to be you're not conceding things. It's just it's a bit of give and take. And look, a lot of owners have one business in their life, and so they don't know what goes on with the sale process. If they've got a good advisor, good broker, it helps. Lots of advisors to these owners also don't do sales that often. So you're going to get it's a bumpy process. It'll range, practically it ranges from you make an approach there and you say you're interested. They'll give you nothing because they don't want to. They want to sound you out, or they'll give you everything they've got. So it's a wild swing. The key for you, if you're going to invest time, is to many of them don't really understand what's in their profit and loss. They don't understand what their true underlying profits are or the key drivers of profit. So again, you've just got to have some of your own. Be clear on what you want out of them by way of information, and be clear on how you're going to evaluate that information. And so, like a lot of the sellers will assume they've got the power, especially if you've approached them directly. but that's not the case. And I say that because when you do make the approach, you just got to put it back onto your terms straight away, and say something as simple as, look, we're looking at a lot of different businesses. Unless you give me this sort of information, I won't be able to make a proper assessment. So there are ways to put it back on your terms. Look, owners do ebb and flow on their interest in selling, and sometimes it's trying to be clever. Sometimes they just get busy. So you just need to, if it's a good business that you like, persist. To really start to understand, where an owner is at. Are they, the sort of people you want to deal with and invest time in understanding their business? Just ask them some questions straight up, and at the right time. Maybe not in the first phone call, but are you currently for sale? Have you been on the market before? What's your exit plan? If you sell, what's important other than just the dollars? It's surprising that there are factors that owners consider really important, other than just dollars. What is the reason for you considering selling? Who is involved in this decision to sell? Is it just you, or is it the nearest and dearest, or do they have to go and talk to other shareholders? So these are the sorts of questions that you start to get a feel for the kind of person that you're dealing with as the owner of the business. If you get into a good conversation, you can start to ask things like, if you're going to stay, how would you double the business in 3 years, and what would you do if you were 30 years old, knowing what you know now? So these are great great questions to get the conversation flowing, which is what you've got to do. It's important to ask for the right information at the right time. So a core skill you're going to have to develop as a business buyer is some basic and rigorous financial analysis, cutting through all the tax return information and determining what you're trying to determine is what's left in the business after everybody else has been paid. That's a simple way to put it. So you may not necessarily want all the information up front, but you might want a high-level summary. As a minimum, you want 3 or 4 years worth of financials, perhaps a tax return, their current management accounts, and what you need to have an understanding that the correlation between what's in a tax return and what the business actually does by way of a profit is can be quite different. There's a process to go through called adjusting or adding back, which is really just kind of reconciling what's in the tax return with what the business actually makes. You can ask for a lot of information up front, but you can also waste a lot of time. So just get really tight on what you need. You can also get an owner offside by asking for too much too early. I guess it's a case of be wary if they hand over anything and everything. It means lots of other people may well have the same information, and lots of other people know about the business. And the way, I guess it's you're engaging in a dialogue with someone who owns a business, and it's usually important to them, and it's private and confidential. So the way you go about asking and how you use that information is important in developing a dialogue that's good for the owner and good for you. You get what you need, and they understand that you need that. This is quite a detailed slide, but if I was to put what you need to do in 2 or 3 sentences, is take 3 or 4 years worth of financial information and get it onto a one spreadsheet. You average all the expenses from highest to lowest. So you look at and it's going to be wages and rent that are the biggest expense items. In doing this stuff, which I do day in, day out, it's about it's about looking at a line-by-line analysis of the information. It sounds scary. It's actually not. You do it a few times, and you'll quickly start to understand businesses quite quickly, and you'll see where the business makes and loses money. There's this process for adjusting to reconcile between the tax return, which is always about reducing tax, and what the business actually makes, and then getting it down to what's left for the owner after everybody else is paid. That's the takeaway for you tonight. Just try to get it back to make sure everybody's been paid, and then you got the surplus left for the owner, the owner, and you can determine how you want to dish that up. Once you got that right, then you can start to think about the right way to value it. And Kerry asked a question about that, and I said there are fundamentally two ways. One's to apply a multiple of the earnings or the net profit, and the other is to think about it from the point of view of what would it cost me and what risks involve in building something like this that already exists. Pretty heavy going, but anyway, that's what you got to do. There's some really good, I understand for anybody taking this challenge on, and I encourage you to do it. But there's some good resources out there to help you through this process, and there's publicly available information on what businesses are for sale. Sometimes it's hard to get really good quality data about what businesses actually sell for, but I can tell you that if the business is making a profit after the owner's been paid, somewhere between 1 and 4 for a typical small business would be a good multiple of earnings valuation. The Biz Exchange is an example of a site that's got some data on it. But talking to people, some brokers can be and franchise groups can have data available on their own sites. Some of them might talk to you, some might, a lot won't. Or they'll be guarded. You talk to the industry associations. ATO, Australian Tax Office, has some data, and other business owners. That's where from the right owners you can get a lot of really high quality information. When you are dealing with an owner, owners don't usually operate solo. They've got a family, they've got nearest and dearest. They also, it can be really, the staff, their customers can be really important in what happens in the business to some owners. So if you're empathetic, you understand that, it can help you progress some deals where others may not, who are just purely focused on perhaps a bottom line, or there are owners that care about that stuff, and it makes for some good buying opportunities. It can also be might be a reason for you to move on, but there's always other people involved in an owner's decision, and at some point most owners, if it gets serious in a conversation about selling their business, they're going to go off and get some advice, and often that advice is biased or just out of date. So be wary that, or be expectant that things can be going on quite swimmingly, and then something from left field. But it's that those sort of things are part of the process of finding and buying a business. If you do get down the track and you've found a business, you've had a really open dialogue with the owner, and you feel comfortable with what they are telling you, he or she. If you've determined that the business has got some value to you, whatever it may be, where a lot of good potential opportunities go off the rails is when the process continues as chat and talk without actually writing things down. I'm a very big user of heads of agreements or other documents like indicative offer, just to to clarify in writing what it is you both have agreed or thought you agreed. If you can't get it down in writing, and you progress to a point where you're both thinking it's going to happen, the tears are a common event because you haven't written it down, people haven't understood or have misunderstood. So if you're serious, write something down, consult a lawyer when you do that, but it's the best way to really figure out whether you got a deal here. And the key things you got to cover are basically price, very obvious, the timing, what is and isn't included, how handover or transition is going to be, if it's needed, and how it's going to be managed, what's going to happen to staff, how you're going to do your due diligence, whether you expect the outgoing owner not to compete with you, what are the conditions. So they're just an example of, these things. Heads of agreements can be 1 to 2 pages, maybe 3, and it's a very comprehensive summary. And if you can't look at each other in the eye and think, well, that kind of feels like a deal to us, then you're trouble ahead.
Can I just jump in there, Michael, because
Yeah.
I think that non-competing can be quite important, and we certainly bought a business and had it written into the contract that they weren't to go and open up or start a similar business, just go and get a new location and start up the same business within a 15-kilometre radius of our town.
Yep.
In particular industries, they might be just thinking, oh, I just want to get a new location, and they're going to take all their existing customers with them. So you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, absolutely do. And and look, there's all sorts of ways to document that legally, and you've been through it. The biggest thing for me is as you go through the process with the owner, you're uncovering what the owner's intentions are. You don't necessarily have to ask them directly, but you're finding out as you go, they're off to Queensland. They can't wait to get there. They want to go fishing or whatever it is. You should and you need to document it all, but you also along the way, and this can take months, typically to form a deal, a potential deal. So you really should be eyes and ears open all along for why that owner is selling and what they're planning. Yeah, to avoid the issue as much as you can. But you're right. It's happened before and it'll happen again. Look, if you certainly want to keep the negotiation, you want to keep a bit of tension in the process. Everybody will probably do that differently, but for me, I do a lot of buying of businesses for people and for bigger businesses, and things that I tactics I try to use are to say that, look, we're looking around the industry, whether we buy your business or somebody else's in the industry doesn't really matter to us. It's all about the right price. So it helps them keep them on their back foot a little bit. There are other ways for us to get in the industry. Be clear that with your parameters and say, look, we're not going to pay ridiculous prices, so let's get that out on the table right now. But fundamentally, I think it's about being really purposeful in your approach. If people don't want to lose a good buyer, and price, everybody starts with price. Everybody talks about price, but in the end, it's one of a number of things that will get a deal across the line. By being purposeful, I'm talking about tightly managing the process and stick to what you say. Stick to your timelines. Addressing, I've talked about it ad nauseum earlier, but addressing the non-financial issues of the owner can really help. If you're prepared to go the extra mile with, I don't know, it could be staff, it could be customers, whatever. You might find you get the business at a lower price than somebody else, and everybody's a bit happier. well, certainly watch out for owners and their advisors coming in at the last minute trying to, try something cute, like a bogus other buyer. And genuinely watch out for when, all of a sudden someone's deciding they're going to sell their business and they go, wow, is that what I really want to do? And owners do change their mind. So it's often temporary, but you need to, don't panic, but look out for it. Look, I know we're going, we're kind of time-wise, I'm getting towards the end. I'll rush through this one. When you're, if you got your own, whether you got your own resources or you're borrowing it, buy a business that's good value for you, whatever that might be, and that might be very different to another buyer, and it might be very, very different with what the owner started out expecting. But they're typically hard to finance. If you're going to have to finance it, it's tough going. Real estate security helps an awful lot, but there's certainly some emerging niche financiers, might be able to fund a little bit or part of a business acquisition. But the more equity you bring, the less reliant on debt, the more attractive it is to owners, particularly if it's coming in at lower than what they would ideally have liked for the business. So overall, it's just hard. And vendor finance, we hear about a lot, but that's when the owner, leaves some money in the business. Doesn't really happen all that much in my experience. You're going to have to get good professional advice. Just make sure that you don't just assume your current professional advisors are up for the job. They can be fantastic at legal, they can be fantastic at tax, but buying and selling businesses is a fast-moving and it's kind of space, a fast-moving part of the economy, and not all trusted professional advisors are up to speed with what goes on. So get the right advisors at the right time. And when you're dealing with advisors, just be really clear what you want and what you expect. I do find a tendency for long-standing professional advisors to try to give advice on one hand, but also give a personal opinion to the owner that they've known for a long time, and the two for me can conflict really badly. When you as a potential buyer engage with a professional, be clear what you want. Do you want their opinion or do you want their advice? They're very different things. But underneath it all, you've got to build in your own capacity to progress deals, progress financial analysis, to some extent on your own, under your own wing, and own sales just for a period of time. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of money on professional advisors. Key documents to think about at the close of a deal: a non-disclosure agreement, so confidentiality. I've talked about the heads of agreement. Formal due diligence is always an important near last step. So there's lots of good checklists around, and then you'll be dealing with a full sale contract. So get familiar with those earlier rather than leaving it right till the end. For me, to find and buy a business, I reckon you got to allow 6 to 18 months. If you got really lucky, so you're starting you start today. If you found and bought a business within 6 months, you'd be doing extraordinarily well. But it can take a lot longer, 18 months, 2 years, if you do it properly and right. So we're running out of time. So but you're still going to have to go through it. Use consistent effort. Make sure your criteria are good. Develop effective relationships with the owners. The slide will be available for those that want to dig deeper on that project plan. At the end of all this, you're going to have, I can tell you from experience, there's going to be some hurdles to finding and buying a business. The first one is finding the time to do it. We're all busy, but you have to carve out time to explore and find the right business. you're going to take time. It's going to be hard to work out what might be the right business, but you've got to start. It's going to be hard to know what information to ask for and how to analyze it, but you can get good at that quite quickly. Financing can be a real hurdle. And the other big one is, is owners changing their minds. It happens all the time. If you're going to buy a business, that's just what you've got to deal with. So I am finished. That's a little bit about me. I've been at this since 2002, and I'm going to be at it for a long time yet. If you want to contact me after this webinar, kerrcapital.com.au. Kerry, thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you found that and the guests found that valuable.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Michael. And leave that slide up so that we can see that. Having purchased a business where it was just word of mouth that they were thinking of retiring and going through that process. And then in another scenario, we actually approached another business and inquired about purchasing for all the reasons that you just spoke about. So it was lovely to actually hear that summary, and would have been very helpful to me if had gone through all that with you beforehand. So that was fantastic.
Next one.
Yes, yeah, well, that's right. You've actually got me quite excited now. I'm thinking, wow, maybe I should consider another business. But thank you so much. Now we'll just see if there's any questions. We'll just...
Of course, yeah.
Okay, we have a question, Michael. What happens when you have two valuations for a business that are just miles apart? Does it happen? What do you do?
Kerry, look, and thank you for the question. It happens all the time, and the valuations will be extreme. One end of the spectrum to the other. What most people, just about everybody, forgets or doesn't understand is that valuations are opinions of value. They're usually and mostly coming from someone from a perspective or there's an agenda. We want to buy, so we want it low, and we want to sell, so it's high. So they're opinions. The most important thing, most important advice I could give to anybody is to set those aside and focus on determining what the business is worth to you in your particular circumstances. The extreme valuations are part of the game, but you can get caught up and waste a lot of time and effort. So focus on what's the business worth to you and walk away if it's not there, and buy if it is.
Well, that's very good sound advice to finish our webinar on. Thank you so much, Michael, for imparting your wisdom, and for everyone for listening. And we've certainly recorded this so that we can use it as a resource for people to tap into in the future. So that's a wrap, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry.